Welcome to Technology and Education Today. I'm Richard Smith.
And I'm Caroline Crawford, and we are coming to you from the University of Houston, Clear Lake in Houston, Texas, USA.
And today we are discussing some tips for putting together your first online course, or maybe even an online course for people who are somewhat experienced.
It's difficult no matter what.
Yes, well,
I start from scratch every single time I think about creating a new online course or online training environment, whatever it might be. I start from scratch each time. So it feels like a new experience every single opportunity.
Well, you know, my philosophy is, and I more or less start from scratch also, but I try to make the course as simple as possible for me to put together and as simple as possible for me to maintain. And also, when I say maintain, I mean make corrections to the course, updates, and also make certain that it is clear enough for the students to understand how to proceed through the course without having to send me emails asking for explanations of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, you learned that lesson early on.
I learned that lesson because the first online course I ever taught was designed by somebody else, and I used to get 20 to 30 emails a night.
At midnight, I'd walk down to y'all's offices, and you'd be like, I can't believe it. I still have more responses I have to give before I can go home. It's like, it's midnight, Richard. It's midnight.
It was a little hairy.
It was a lot, Harry. It was difficult.
So at the University of Houston...
so you learned your lesson quickly, and by watching you, I learned quite a bit about how not to create a course.
And that's... Well, we both learned by the seat of our pants, so to speak. But basically,
absolutely,
at the University of Houston, we have moved...
Clear Lake.
We have moved from using the course management system WebCT to using Blackboard. Now we're on Blackboard 9.1.
But we've also used Moodle, and we've created our own web shells for courses that we didn't have a learning course management system environment.
That's true, and Moodle also...
We've done the gamut pretty much.
At one point, I was teaching Moodle to my online students, but that's neither... to my students who are learning how to create online classes. But we've switched over to Blackboard, and one of the reasons for doing that is that Blackboard has a number of models for courses that are built into it.
Templates?
Templates, yes. And now I...
did not know that. Good to know.
Yes, you can have a discussion model course, you can have a problem-solving course. I use the simplest model of all, and that is the course that replicates a face-to-face course. So for instance, at the college level, we might have one meeting per week for 3 hours in a face-to-face class. So for each of the 15 weeks in my courses, I have one class represented online, and that class is contained in a folder in Blackboard, and it follows a very traditional method of instruction. So that in that class, there's a section where there's an overview of what the class is going to teach. I also explain the goals and then the objectives. I have instruction where I tell the students what I want them to learn. Now this instruction can either be a textbook reading assignment, or it can be something that I've written myself and that I think the students should know, or a combination of both. Following that, they have the actual assignment. And within that assignment, there are specific steps for them to do. And then following that, I note the exact items that they have to submit each week. So there can be very little error in trying to figure out what they need to submit. And then, of course, we also list the standards that that particular class meets. So that's the very basic, simple outline of the class. And in Blackboard...
I go at it from a totally different standpoint.
Okay, I know. And
I always begin with the analysis phase. Always, always, always. Who are my students? What do I need them to learn? What are the goals? What are the learning objectives? What is the environment in which we're working? What is the subject matter that we want to address within the course?
Then what does a typical class of yours look like?
There is no typical class.
Aha, see, that's where we differ. I have a typical class, so my students know what to expect.
I don't have a template. It all depends upon what the subject matter is, who the learners are. I pretty much know who the learners are by now, although they're always shifting, so I always have to go through the analysis phase.
They're all in our master's degree program. They're always going to be the same.
Well, See, I don't agree with that statement, but okay. I will respect the fact that you say that. But I still go through that analysis phase the whole time, every single time, with the subject learners, the subject matter, everything and anything. What I've learned throughout my research endeavors, that's where that little instructional design model I developed came from, was because of the learning process. And oh my gosh, this is so not the way that I go through an instructional design process.
But once that course is designed, and
well, going through analysis and design and development and implementation, especially the evaluation with the consistent formative evaluation components. I'm always going through what's working, what's not.
We teach that course the second time. Do you then do another analysis and look at your students again and so on and so forth? Because if you did that, you'd have a major reanalysis and redesign each and every time you taught that section.
Every 2 or 3 times, yes, I do go through and analyze again whether or not it's working, what's not working, if it's making my life difficult, why, if it's making the student's life difficult and confusing and they're not meeting the learning objectives. As I'm instructing, I'm making note of this, but also every 2 or 3 times it's taught, I'm still going through and doing all that again and reconsidering. Now, is it going to be a total revamp of the course? Maybe. And I'm also happy about that.
See, that's why I do things the simple way. The simple way.
Well, it does make my life more difficult, but on the other hand, and I'm not suggesting that's not true with you, but it's all about the learners, and I want them to represent our program and their learning experience from me in a certain manner. I want them to be able to go out there and hit the road, and everything is wonderful, and I know what I'm doing, and being the best professional possible, so that at some point they might come back and say, yeah, well, Crawford had something to do about it.
Well, Crawford
I actually might have learned something from her.
Probably did have something to do with that.
Exactly! That's what I hope for.
I know. But folks, if you'll take my advice, you'll do it the simple way. So that
yours is much more succinct. I will give you that.
Right. You come out with a succinct model. And let's say...
And easy to follow, easy to instruct.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that
And the students never get lost in your course.
They don't.
You will be able to complete your sentence sooner or later.
One of the things that you might consider is having discussions. And I do some of my courses do have discussions in them. One of the errors that people usually make who design their first online courses is to simply put in an assignment in a discussion and have the students respond to it as if they were not going to speak to anybody else.
Ooh, I do that. I do that. It was the dumbest thing I've ever done.
In other words,
poor instructional design.
The instructor might simply say, read this chapter and then let me know what you think of it.
Respond to this prompt.
Yeah, respond to a prompt. Well, that's not going to provoke a discussion. So what I do is, for each class, I have a discussion that's on the topic of the class. And it's a discussion topic. It may require reading. And then I'll have a prompt which actually is kind of controversial in one way or another, so it will provoke a discussion. Then each student is required to respond to the original prompt, and then after that, they must respond to the response that another student in the class put into that discussion. So this is a structured discussion, and it makes life easier for the students, and it will make life a lot easier for you when you have to grade, because you know exactly that you have to, 1, look for an initial response, 2, look for 2 more responses to other students.
And it gets the conversation going. It's not just, okay, I'm done with that and never look at it again,
right. And then,
which is brilliant.
And then, after you understand that each student has 3 responses or 2 responses, the initial response and a response to 1 or 2 students, you can, when you read their responses, you can read the responses for quality. But you have a baseline that you are dealing with in the number of responses, rather than just hope that the students respond, and maybe one student responds 10 times, another student responds 1 time. Now you've got you have a grading problem. Another thing where
you're right, I did learn that from you. Yeah. Instead of expecting people, oh, I'm so engaged with this material that naturally they will respond and read and respond to other people's posts. It just doesn't happen. There's not enough time in the world.
It doesn't happen.
Unless you mandate it as part of the instructional process.
Yeah, see, the difference is when you are in a face-to-face class, you can have an open-ended discussion because you, as the instructor, are there to moderate that discussion, and you can, if somebody is not responding, you can ask that student a question and make keep the discussion going and get each and every student in the class to participate, maybe not on the first class, but at the second class. In an online discussion, if you expect everybody to participate, then
you have to design it in.
You have to design that in. Another item that which is very popular amongst first-time designers of online courses is group work. Now, Caroline and I go back and forth on group work all the time. I try to avoid group work in my online courses because the problem is that if you've taught class face-to-face with group work, and especially if the groups have to work outside of the class, you'll know that not all the students respond or participate equally.
Are fully engaged.
Are fully engaged or participate equally in the group discussion. That is big enough pain in the neck in a face-to-face class. But when you have an online class, what happens is that the students who are participating will complain to you that other students aren't participating. And now that means it's your responsibility to try and find those students and find out why they are not participating. And then you might possibly get a response from those students who are supposedly not participating that indeed they are participating. And now you find yourself mediating between 2 or 3 students. So that's something I tend to avoid. What I do, and I know you were going to ask me that question, well, Richard, what do you do if you don't have your students do group work? Well, one technique that I use...
I love just sitting here. You just carry on your own conversation, and I know what you're going to ask me, so I'll just say it. Okay, go on.
One technique that I use is to have students work together as teams of 2. Where one student will work on a project, and another student will work on the same project. Perhaps it is a proposal for an online course. So I've asked each student to come up with a proposal for an online course. When the student comes up with the initial proposal for the online course, that student will then submit his or her proposal to his or her partner. That partner reviews it.
So it's a peer review process.
Right, and critiques it, and then sends that paper back to the original student. And they do this back and forth. So now you have interaction between your students, but it's a simple interaction, and it's an interaction that can be controlled. So that's a technique I use for interaction with students that avoids the problem of students who are not responding. By the way, even with that, I do find on occasion that some students don't respond to their partners. In this case, what I simply do is take the participating student and put that student in a second group of 2. So now we have a group of 3. Now this might seem to be a problem, but really it isn't, because student A evaluates student B's paper, student B evaluates student C's paper, and student C evaluates student A's paper. So it's no additional work for anybody, and it solves that problem. And student D, the one who is not participating at all, that's the one who does not have anything to comment on, so does not get a grade. So what happens is I grade the students on their response to the other students.
That's a great idea. I usually speak with the students. Like, for example, in my first course, I wanted the whole semiotic component and metaphoric representations is something that I found rather intriguing within an online course environment, kind of framing the subject matter. And I started realizing way back when, most people didn't have the internet accessibility, the speed mandated to actually pull that off. And that also included any type of video interface, PowerPoint, anything that had graphics, which blew up the size. There was no opportunity to integrate that because of usability issues. If you want the student to actually be able to engage with the material, they have to be able to access the material. So slowly, every few semesters, I start communicating with the students. So what do you think about speed? What do you think about integrating video? What do you think about multimedia components? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Until the primary feedback I get is that, yes, this is a viable opportunity now. Yes, you can pull this off without serious implications. Like, awesome. So now, of course, significant levels of video and multimedia components have been integrated into classes. Recently, maybe a year ago, I finally received from the students overarching communication that yes, teamwork is doable at this point. We do have the opportunities, the open source and freely available opportunities to interface appropriately, and the speed is there so we can communicate through video chats or whatever happens to be available. And so I've integrated a team component into one of my courses as a trial. And it's worked brilliantly over the past year's time, right up until a couple of months ago this semester, and things are somewhat falling apart, and I'm curious why.
Well,
And it's too early in the semester to know why yet, but I'm very intrigued to find out what goes on.
Well, but that's why I'm saying, if you, especially if you're designing your first online course, I would bypass the teamwork on the first course, because
Well, it depends on the learning objectives and goals that you're focusing in on.
Aside from the learning objectives and goals, I'm trying to keep things simple for the people. And if you put
but as you and I keep going back,
if you put wait,
all right, I can wait.
If you put in a team experience during your first online course, and that is not working for you, your first online course that you yourself design and are teaching is going to become a lot more painful. So
True.
if you want to have a team experience or provide your students with a team experience, I would not put it into your first online course that you design.
Not your first one.
Wait till you get some experience on this. And one other thing, you mentioned video. And these days it's very simple to create a screencast of something that you want to demonstrate to your students. And the students really like this. There's only one problem with it. Every time there's a variation in your course,
you get to redo it. Yay!
Yes, you get to redo it. So that can be time consuming. So you need to be careful with screencasts, and make certain you do your screencasts, these which are videos, on subjects which are not, or topics which are not going to change. They're going to be remain static for at least a year or two, because you don't want to get in the cycle of having to redo videos all the time. You know what? Especially if you're a high school teacher or a college teacher, you don't really get any extra money in most cases.
Or higher education.
Yes, college is higher education.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed college part. I just heard high school and middle school.
And so you're not getting any extra money for extra work that you yourself are causing. The thing to do is keep in mind your objectives that you want to achieve with your students, and then pick the easiest path that will let you achieve those objectives, while at the same time providing an interesting experience for the students as they progress through the course.
Well, this is something that you and I go back and forth about, because we're teaching graduate level courses, and most of the instructional designers and trainers who come out of our coursework, they are expected to be a viable part of a team environment, which is why I'm of the opinion that the teams are so important, and being able to work within a team environment, even if it's not professional where you can get fired, it's still within a graduate environment, and the professionalism necessary and appropriate towards successfully achieving a team environment and teamwork. That, I think that is vitally important for the courses. And your points about the constantly updating the information within the courses, it's so amazingly annoying that no matter how many times you go through the course before your semester begins, and you're double checking the hyperlinks and are the videos working, no matter how many times you do that, or how close to the very beginning of the semester that you're doing that, it's not going to be a working link at some point. You're going to have many of your students communicating with you that, well, this link doesn't work, this link doesn't work. It's like, I just checked that! You're kidding me!
Or worse,
so it's constant.
The link will work, but the content has
significantly shifted.
And that's another one of the reasons why I say try to keep your courses simple. Keep to a simple design. And yes, we know that that group work is significant. It's important, but wait till you have some experience with designing an online course, and then do some reading on group work, and design groups that are going to work for the students and are going to work for you, and avoid problems, because you're going to have to deal with those problems. So my philosophy is keep it simple. Especially on your first course, let the students know what you want them to learn. Then explain to them what they need to do to learn it. Provide them with resources, and check on them. Check it through tests or discussions, and or rubrics on what they've submitted, and let that first or second course go with a very simple construct until you become familiar with teaching online, and I'm very comfortable with it. And then you can do some more innovative things. But you know what?
You do very well. Your courses are very easy to instruct, and very easy for the learner to understand. Mine take way too much time and effort,
but
I love it.
Guess what time it is?
Time to go.
It's time to go. We've reached the end of another session of technology and education today.
Yay.
And this was a very vivid discussion. I'm Richard Smith.
I'm Caroline Crawford. And again, goodbye from the University of Houston Clear Lake in Houston, Texas, USA. Bye!